The movie unfolds with a powerful scene at the Jewish Orthodox synagogue, where priest Rav Krushka delivers a moving sermon. As he discusses the history of mankind, detailing how God painstakingly created man and woman from a meager quantity of earth, his voice is filled with reverence. He emphasizes in a somber manner that God embedded the seed of disobedience within this divine creation, giving people the capacity to challenge conventions, unlike any other creature. He emphasizes the delicate balance between the holiness of angels and the cravings of monsters in an adoring and sorrowful tone. He reaches out to a fellow worshiper for help, but shortly passes out. Rushing to his side in an effort to assist him in breathing, they encircle him in fear and anguish. The scene changes as the camera focuses in on Ronit Krushka, a gifted photographer who lives in the dynamic center of Manhattan. She devotes herself to her work and observes people with tattoos with an artist's eye. Although there is a strong creative energy in the air, there is a shadow over this passionate period of creativity. She is interrupted by her co-worker, who implores her to answer a pending phone call. When Ronit receives the heartbreaking news of her father's passing, the camera depicts her facial expression as emotions flood her features. Tears fill her eyes as the sadness she is feeling falls upon her like a heavy shroud. Ronit, who has been severely hurt by this unexpected strike, looks for comfort in the vast night sky. Ronit, feeling trapped, goes to a bar to drown her sorrow in drink, in the hopes of losing herself in the moment. In the scene that follows, we depict her having intimate moments with a complete stranger in the restroom, in an attempt to suppress her emotions. Subsequently, we catch a glimpse of her skating sorrowfully on an ice rink, her face expressing her melancholy and loneliness. She stops to rest on a bench, in an effort to calm herself and collect her thoughts. She thinks it is now time to return home, while clinging to her father's silver necklace. In the following scene, Ronit leaves the airport and makes her way to David's home, while seeming uncertain and terrified. A mixture of relief and desire appears on Ronit's face when the door opens to see David. David is shocked, since he wasn't expecting her to arrive. Ronit informs David that she will check into a hotel, so as not to annoy anyone. But David notices how upset she is and wants to protect her from the oncoming emotional storm. He reassures her that everyone is coming to honor her father, given that he is highly respected and admired by everyone. Regarding this, Ronit feels both proud and scared. David extends an invitation, and when she accepts, she feels out of place among people she doesn't know. She withdraws into a corner, experiences a range of sad emotions. Then her aunt Fruma enters the room and embraces Ronit upon seeing her. Fruma has a kind expression on her face. Moshe, her uncle, remains far from her. Ronit is led to the kitchen by David, who enters the scene after sensing the tense atmosphere. Shortly after, we see Ronit drinking her coffee when she tells David that she is waiting for a cab to take her to the hotel. David, on the other hand, encourages her to stay at their house. Ronit acknowledges David's offer with a nod and a smile, but she is adamant on going to the hotel. Out of worry and curiosity, David then asks Ronit if she is there solely to grieve her father, or if there is something more going on. Ronit instantly denies having any ulterior motives. Then she changes the subject and mocks David's marriage. Ronit is startled when Esti quickly walks into the kitchen, and her expression reflects it. They exchange heartfelt greetings. Esti, her face etched with sadness and exhaustion, expresses her sorrow about Ronit's father's passing. Ronit proposes that instead of offering more food, they catch up and talk to each other. Esti totally agrees with David when he states that he invited Ronit to stay with them, rather than reserve a hotel room. As they reunite, taking solace in familiar faces and shared history, the air is thick with unspoken emotions. Ronit playfully asks Esti if David's wife is good. At that exact moment, Esti drops a bombshell. She is married to David. This shocks Ronit, and she seems upset because nobody told her, even though they were once close. In an attempt to justify their silence, Esti, in a harsh tone, tells Ronit that she abruptly disappeared from their lives, and then she walks out. Shortly after, David follows Ronit as she heads outside to smoke. Distressed, Ronit wonders why David withheld details about her father's sickness. David claims that maybe her father did not want her to perceive him as frail. Despite David's explanation, Ronit is still mad that she was not informed. David attempts to make her feel better, but ultimately walks away in frustration, as Ronit keeps blaming him. Later, we witness Ronit watching David perform a ceremony before heading out for the funeral. While walking, Ronit notices Esti ahead, turning towards her and checking on her from time to time. Both their looks reveal a mixture of feelings: concern, longing, and curiosity. Esti shows Ronit her room after coming back from the cemetery. The air is heavy with tension, though. Ronit asks Esti whether she ought to look for another place to stay. Esti, on the other hand, gives her an icy stare, and informs her that it is up to her to make the decision, and that she may ultimately do anything she wants. Ronit considers it for a while before deciding to stay. David then appears shortly afterwards with a blanket. The newspaper has an article on Ronit's father's passing, which she reads aloud. They stated that her father did not have any children, which depresses her. David attempts to reassure her and ease her suffering by telling her that it was a mistake. Ronit questions if she loved and cared for her father as much as others do. David assures her that she will always be his daughter, in an act of kindness. Esti returns to the scene at that point, with hangers for Ronit's clothes. She is then wished a pleasant and peaceful night by both David and Esti. However, Ronit briefly halts them and shows them some of her stunning photographs before they leave. They both look through her work, praising her for her kind gesture and expressing their amazement at her effort. Curiosity gets the better of her, therefore Ronit questions if they are really happy together, and they both confirm it, before letting her be by herself with her thoughts. The next morning, Esti wakes up next to David. Her face is filled with a mixture of love and confusion. She clutches her husband and kisses him, interrupting his morning prayer. Then Ronit is shown in the frame as she makes her way to the cemetery to visit her father's grave. When she gets there, she discovers 3 of his students praying for him. At first they ignore her existence, but when they learn that she is Rav's daughter, they give their sympathies and then depart, leaving her feeling extremely bereaved. The next sequence captures David accompanying Esti back to Roseman's school following her break. Upon her return, the students and the director extend her a warm welcome. Subsequently, David heads to work as usual. On his way, he engages in a conversation with the rabbi and his colleague. Inquisitive, they ask about Ronit staying with him, which he confirms. Then he joins his students in talking about the scriptures. Later, Ronit retreats to a coffee shop to eat alone, her mind lost in a sea of thoughts and emotions. Later that night, Esti and David have an intimate time in bed together. Their amorous moment is a mix of passion and anxiety. After their prayers, David, Esti, and Ronit go to dinner with the rabbi and his wife Rebbitzin Goldfarb at the Hartog house. Their talk starts out light with jokes and storytelling. Ronit's eyes brighten with excitement as they continue to talk about her photographic accomplishments. Ronit is asked by Rebbitzin, who shifts the conversation about her family name, and whether she is proud of it. Esti steps in and says that women frequently take their husband's last name and forget about their own, while Ronit remains quiet and anxious. At that point, Ronit and Esti share a reassuring look amidst the tension. Everyone is shocked by Esti's unexpected comment, even her husband David, who is taken aback by what she said. Ronit brings up her desire to sell the house. Her aunt Fruma insists that she keep her mom's candlesticks for her children in the future. Rebbitzin goes further, questioning Ronit about her life in New York. She wonders why Ronit is not married yet, and offers her advice about how women should live. Ronit becomes irritated, saying marriage is more of a rule. Her uncle Moshe makes attempts to defuse the situation, but Ronit repeatedly asserts that getting married without love would be extremely detrimental to her. The revelation hangs heavy in the air, leaving everyone in startled silence, which Ronit attributes to being exhausted from her trip before she departs, bidding everyone farewell. As soon as Ronit heads out, Esti asks David to accompany Ronit home, and he agrees. Walking home, Ronit's emotions get the best of her, and she wonders if her dad knew she loved him. In an attempt to comfort her, David confirms that he did, but unfortunately he cannot hug her, due to his religion's constraints. On the ensuing day, Ronit goes to see her uncle Moshe at his workplace. She wants to talk about selling the house in great detail. Moshe gives her the keys and asks her to gather her father's belongings. However, Moshe informs her that the Rav left the house for synagogue. When she asks for his assistance in selling it, Ronit feels both upset and angry. Moshe holds her accountable for abandoning her father when he needed her. But Ronit attempts to justify her absence with a sorrowful tone, admitting that she had no knowledge of her father's sickness. Yet Moshe keeps blaming her, leaving her with tremendous regret which causes her to wipe her tears. On the other hand, while shopping, Esti encounters a neighbor who informs her about seeing Ronit. Esti quickly leaves the store and joins Ronit, who leads her to the Rav's house with heavy steps, a visit that evokes memories. Upon entrance, seeing her dad's belongings in such disarray makes Ronit heartbroken. She confesses that she doesn't want the house, but she wanted instead her dad to leave a note that proves his concern and love for her. She keeps recalling memories as she examines her father's antiques, and begins recounting how he would spend his time in the old good days when everything seemed great, before fate took another turn. Ronit addresses Esti, wondering whether she should leave the house early, since she feels it is futile to remain there. Esti approaches her, holds her hand and kisses it gently, and they embrace each other tightly. They start kissing one another fiercely, their kisses fueled by a potent mix of desire, as though they have been apart for a long time. However, the boundaries of reality intervene. Ronit stops and distances herself, after realizing that Esti is married. Esti tries to remain cool in the meantime. Ronit goes downstairs, and Esti follows suit. The tension between them remains palpable. Before departing, they exchange sincere apologies, and share another kiss charged with fervor. At that point, Esti confesses that she was the one who delivered the news of Ronit's father's passing. On their way back home, Esti claims to respect David more than she loves him romantically. She recounts that when Ronit went away, she became extremely depressed, and did what the Rav advised her by getting married to David. They engage in a profound talk about the twists of fate and how their lives have changed. In the midst of the embrace of time-honored values, Ronit is curious when she learns of the considerable change Esti has gone through since she left. Esti bares her soul as she talks of the depths of sadness she experienced before the Rav provided her with the direction of David's loving embrace, which made the loneliness she was feeling go away. Esti has a voice that combines power and sensitivity. She demonstrates the profound effect that the Rav's counsel has had on her. Esti lifts the curtain on her life after Ronit's departure. As she talks about how becoming an instructor has given her a special sense of consolation, there is a twinkle of pride and mischief in her eyes. Yet when Ronit playfully mocks Esti by calling her life basic, Esti reacts with a surprised countenance. Her remarks ring a tone of honest happiness, indicating that, despite being straightforward, her life is unquestionably meaningful. She questions Ronit whether she has been with other women, but the latter denies it. Ronit goes on and wonders if she still has feelings for women, and Esti acknowledges her preference, even taking a drag from Ronit's cigarette. They continue their journey, playfully joking with each other. Later, they find themselves at the spot where their first kiss took place as the sky gives way to darkness. It is a location full of emotions and memories. There is an unsaid tension in the air that is magnetically charged and impossible to ignore. When their lips come together, the kiss ignites like a long-awaited spark, a union of spirits that is beyond language. But Hinda and her husband Lev's sudden presence burst their loving bubble and immediately put an end to it. As they struggle with the unexpected intrusion, confusion and worry can be seen on Ronit and Esti's faces. Esti's fingers tremble as she retreats, and her heartbeat echoes like the beat of a trapped bird's wings. An instinct compels her to conceal her identity. Ronit is greeted by Hinda, who then introduces her husband while maintaining an air of kindness, despite the turbulence that is actually going on. Hinda wonders if the woman who was accompanying Ronit was Mrs. Kuperman, but Ronit denies that immediately. On the other hand, with a flood of adrenaline rushing through her veins, Esti moves with urgency towards her house. Tears that pour down her cheeks as she struggles with her confusing thoughts, which merge together in the bathroom as she walks in to have a shower, which turns into a haven for her raging emotions. David's voice cuts through her storm. He wants to check to see if she is okay. As he walks inside, Esti hugs him, yet there is an unspoken truth that permeates the gaps between them. David feels it in her unyielding grasp. In the following scene, Esti stands in front of her students as she delivers her courses, when a summons to Mrs. Shapiro's office causes waves of anxiety. When Esti re-meets Hinda and Lev, the tension in the room is as palpable as her anxiety. Their interactions carry a hint of sadness mixed with embarrassment. Then David confidently considers the prospect of gaining control of the synagogue. When one of the officials questions him afterwards and asks if Ronit's presence in his house has an effect on Esti, David brushes it off by insisting that everything is in order, but the idea makes him uneasy. With a dissatisfied expression on her face, Esti exits the school in the meantime, emerging from the darkness of her humiliation. She discovers Ronit close, her face showing concern. They retreat to a quiet spot, and Esti reluctantly admits, after some hesitation, that they must stop their relationship, since the truth can no longer be denied. Ronit's voice trembles with perplexity and anguish as she makes a vow to leave the next day, but Esti refuses her departure, since she does not want them to part ways again. As Ronit suggests that they leave for the city center together, even if they flee, their attraction reaches its height. They sneakily board the train and meander through downtown London streets. They share fixed gazes. Ronit, who makes her desire clear, has Esti's hand in a firm grip. Finally ready to express their enormous desperation, they make their way to a hotel room. The more closely they examine each other's bodies, the stronger their lust becomes. They succumb to their passionate affection and get completely entwined with one another, which is when the action increases. In the aftermath, they find solace in one another's embrace. Esti acknowledges that while Ronit was living in New York, she regularly thought about her. Her words are evidence of her strong love, despite the passing of time and separation. Ronit listens with compassion. They recount their memories of when the Rav first learned of their relationship, and his shocked reaction. With a cigarette lit in her mouth, Ronit looks at Esti admiringly. A little smile appears on her face as she requests that she capture a few shots of her. Esti takes a variety of poses while beaming with happiness, wonder, and enthusiasm. On the other hand, David searches his house for Esti, scowling in fear and perplexity. After her intimate moments with Ronit, Esti goes back home. Carrying the burden of her actions, she apologizes to David for being late. She attempts to speak to David, yet he utterly ignores her. Then while Esti stands beside their bed, David comes up from behind and holds her, fervently pleading for intimacy. Nevertheless, Esti's contradictory emotions rip apart her heart. Discontent fills the room as she slowly draws away, leaving them both sitting on opposite ends of the bed. The following morning, Esti enters the bathroom with a pale face as a sickness grips her. She worries when the idea of being pregnant crosses her mind. Later, when Esti is in the kitchen washing the dishes, David drops his breakfast and walks up to her. He appears both determined and concerned. In an anxious tone, he confronts her and demands to know what is wrong with her. In an effort to learn more, he leans in, asking for the truth. Esti confesses to kissing Ronit, while displaying distress in her expression. In response to her apologies, David accuses her of being ignorant of Ronit's intentions, setting up a fire in his blood. The moment Esti admits she was the one to inform Ronit of her father's passing, the room explodes with emotion, and Esti's words do nothing more than fan the fires. David holds Esti's face in a firm yet kind hand as he demands honesty. At first, Esti tries to hide her emotions, since facing her truth would be very difficult. She eventually opens up, though, admitting her persistent attraction to Ronit. Her declaration of want is laced with longing. The room echoes with David's scream of anguish and astonishment as his voice raises in outrage. The truth leaves them both raw and vulnerable, and Esti's steadfastness clashes with his rage. David withdraws, departing in a mute surrender to the crushing reality, his heart filled with sadness. Shortly after, Esti finds Ronit sitting on the steps upstairs. Ronit's suggestion that she part ways with David looms over Esti like a crucial decision. A blank canvas of unspoken words stretches between them. Finally, Esti's rushed voice can be heard, as she points out being late for school in an attempt to escape the complex situation. In the ensuing scene, David is among those present as a ceremony for the Rav is being held. He extends a warm welcome to guests, while wearing a slight smile that is both bittersweet and thankful. David is carried into the depths of his thoughts by the mournful song, his difficulties appearing as shadows on his face. Ronit seeks solace at a nearby coffee shop. Her sight is clouded with conflicting emotions as her life hangs in the balance. David searches for refuge in a library in the meantime, the warmth of the alcohol calming his grief. David returns home as the night falls, to a tense dinner table and an air of growing anxiety. David breaks the silence by inquiring about Esti's lack of appetite and expressing some worry. Ronit's leaving announcement releases the tension like a gust of wind. David's relief is apparent, as a quiet smile spreads across his face. However, Esti feels as though the ground has moved beneath her, and her emotions have been shattered. Ronit goes to pack her clothes. Later, the exchanging of farewells serves as a reminder of a common past. Ronit's voice is a whisper at the front door, a regret and a goodbye entwined. As Ronit walks away, Esti's eyes soak with tears as she struggles to control her emotions. In the other part of the city, Esti decides firmly to take the train and go get a pregnancy test kit while David is sleeping. Esti comes to the hotel room after she has gotten her test kit, with a nervous and apprehensive look on her face. We see her leaning over the wall with her head up against it, clearly worried. When tears begin to run down her face, she sways back and forth, clasping her hands and praying. The following morning, the airport's busy noises awaken Ronit. As soon as she gathers her belongings, she dashes to the security gate. As she waits, the quiet is broken by the sound of her phone. Ronit answers David's furious tone, her brows wrinkled. He tells her that Esti is nowhere to be found. He becomes even more concerned when Ronit informs her that Esti is not with her, and she assures him she will get in touch with him once she has gone through security. She continues, a worried look on her face, telling the security woman that she is boarding a flight for New York. Later, determined, Ronit makes the choice to help David find Esti. Ronit realizes that David is obviously disturbed when he silently picks her up from the airport. Together, they search every possible location where Esti may have gone. They come home with a sense of failure lingering in the air after their efforts are ineffective. David keeps looking for Esti with tenacity, but his efforts are fruitless. Ronit visits the tree where she and Esti had their first kiss, searching the area, but to no avail. In the following sequence, David loses it and expresses his displeasure, wishing Esti had never contacted Ronit. Ronit claims that he hadn't intended to tell her of her father's passing, but is grateful that Esti did. David explains his reasons for hiding the truth, which were driven by his desire to protect his wife. Esti hears the whole conversation and comes downstairs, revealing her presence. David grabs Esti's hand after a long silence that conveys much. His dread and worry are obvious. Esti shares her unexpected pregnancy news. David's expression brightens, as he expresses hope that a child may help their troubled marriage. Esti, however, dashes his dreams by declaring that she wants to break up with him, since she is yearning for her freedom of choice. She cries out for David to let her go. David withdraws with a heavy heart, leaving Ronit and Esti all by themselves in the middle of their inner struggle. As the night arrives, Ronit and Esti attend the synagogue's hesp, despite the critical looks from their community. Esti tries to patch things up with David, but he doesn't respond and ignores her instead, straining to breach the distance. Ronit and Esti take their seats next to one another as they wait for the ceremony to begin. Ronit eventually tries to persuade Esti to accept a new life in New York with her, but Esti remains silent, the weight of the world upon her heart. As David advances to deliver the eulogy for the Rav, Ronit and Esti's hands intertwine in a gesture of support. David introduces Ronit as the Rav's only child, as he continues to speak after spotting her in the audience. All eyes are focused on her. David discusses the subject of one's own freedom, which the Rav emphasized before his end. David, who is both depressed and broken into pieces, formally offers Esti her freedom, and rejects the new position as a father that has been given to him. David exits the synagogue with tears in his eyes, leaving the crowd startled. Soon after, outdoors, we witness David and Esti embracing one another while feeling both relief and want. When Ronit sees them, she hesitates to join in, but David stretches his arm and asks her to come, which leads to an adorable group embrace among childhood friends. Later, Ronit resolves to leave before things become more complicated, after being lost in thinking. She gets ready for her trip to the airport the following morning. She bids David farewell before reaching out to his bear. And once she goes downstairs, she finds Esti, who is sleeping on the couch, looking pale. Ronit and Esti split ways, their emotions remaining unsaid, as Esti decides not to accompany her to New York. As soon as Ronit's cab takes off, Esti scrambles to catch up with her. They kiss each other passionately, feeling a mixture of regret and resolve to keep in touch. Nevertheless, Ronit intends to take a detour before heading the airport, a bittersweet visit to her father's grave. She stands there, swept away by a rush of memories and closure. As a last-ditch attempt to emotionally connect her past and future, she takes a last photograph. The film's last scene is now at our fingertips. The impression that accepting who we genuinely are frequently necessitates making difficult choices is what is left. But as we work to live a true and satisfying life, we must recognize the courage it takes to defy established norms.